So it's nearly 2025 and I'm trying to use the iPad to anchor a desk setup again. So as I've been going through the motions, it turns out I can do about 70% of what I need to on the iPad. Actually, out of 5 categories of work that I do, there's just one that really tanks things for me. And I hate that because I want this to work so bad. You know, on the website, Apple clearly showcases this setup where you have the iPad Pro plugged into a studio display. And I've got some observations here. Number one, I love the simplicity of this setup. It's killer. It's just so sleek and svelte. It looks great on the desk. But here's something that's really weird though, and I don't know if you can even see it here, but the same background is on both of these, the wallpaper, and it's a little different on the OLED screen versus the studio display. The iPad version is definitely greener than the studio display version. Really not a big deal at all. It's just something I noticed and something I'm pointing out. Something that I feel that is pretty cool here that's definitely changed over the years, and if you haven't tried this in a while, or if you haven't watched anyone talk about this for a while, is that the window placement's really improved. I can pretty much stick a window almost anywhere that I want. If you get too close to the edge, then it gets a little wonky and it sort of places it where it wants to. But especially in the middle of the monitor, you can really place things pretty much with total freedom. And part of what I love about this setup versus using the Mac is Face ID. I love being able to swipe up, unlock everything with Face ID. And yes, I know I can unlock with my Apple Watch really easily when I sit down at the Mac. That's not the point. I just love Face ID. I love it for purchases, for authorizations. And of course, this is way better than it used to be because we have this centered camera now and it's placed correctly. People complain about that forever. It really is cool here. It makes a big difference. And it actually just kind of matches the camera placement on the studio display itself. Let me tell you what might be one of the most surprising things about this setup as I'm trying this out. Now, with the Mac and the way I've redone my workflow in recent months, I would say, where I'm shooting with all these different iPhones and I'm shooting ProRes, really high quality footage, and just dumping that right into the Mac so that I can get right to work. And I'm using this dock over here, this OWC dock, which I did a whole video on, actually over on Daily Tech 2, the second channel, which is not on Daily Tech 1, so go check it out if you want to know more about the dock. The dock situation, while not pretty, is certainly super functional. You know, I end up shooting with all these LaCie drives, and to be able to just plug these right into that dock and get to work is cool. I guess what surprised me is how robust the Files app is now. Not only can I format drives and stuff, that used to be a big complaint. You know, you used to have to ship that over to a Mac and format and stuff there. Like, it basically handles everything that you need it to now if you haven't checked in a while. But I got a couple drives hanging out underneath this monitor riser here, and one is for archive stuff, one is for active projects, and lo and behold, they show up just fine, and I'm able to access all my work, save to those, and it's awesome. So I'm bypassing having to worry about upgrading the internal memory, storage, you know, on the iPad Pro. So really cool. One thing that's uncool though, this is like one little bottleneck for me on the actual tech itself, not to software. We're going to talk about that. And that is the port situation. Because I have to plug this into the studio display, I'm missing that port. And of course, you can plug in only power to this other port over here on the Magic Keyboard, so that's not very useful. What actually is cool though is that I can use the back of the studio display to plug in a bunch of stuff like I actually have. You can see that here, but those are just taken. They're gone. So when I do end up using this OWC dock to plug in extra accessories, whatever they may be, I still end up being about one short. There's always some accessory that I need to plug in and it's just portless. It's homeless. It doesn't have a place to go. And so that's one little bottleneck in my particular workflow that makes it hard for me to get away from a Mac. One thing that I've said many times before is that I love having the Apple Pencil right here, ready to go whenever I need it. And I don't have to choose between using, you know, the Apple Pencil or the keyboard. It's just right here. And it's actually easier to just reach for this. Even if I want to rip it off, I can keep that screen connected and I can just write just like this and mark stuff up, take screenshots. It's just so convenient. And then actually this turns out to be a pretty nice angle for just doing things like quick sketches for your notes or whatever. Several times I just need to get an idea out, see how something would work very roughly as part of a larger project. And I can really do that here. It's so great. And it's so cool to not have to choose either a keyboard first device or a touch Apple Pencil first or both device. You know, with this Magic Keyboard setup, it's like the best of both worlds. If you want some cool wallpaper, check out the wallpaper link. It's down in the description. And this is also an excellent time to pre-order the new AI course. It's coming out soon. I'm so excited about it. There's so much opportunity that AI is bringing down the pipeline. A little bit of that means that you may have to adapt, but it doesn't matter if you're prepared. That's what this course helps you do. So check it out. It's on sale right now. There's a great deal because it's in pre-sale. Or you can check out the other courses. There's a productivity course, freeform course, pro iPhone video essentials, and plenty of others. Okay, so those observations stated, there are 5 different categories of work that I think I basically do throughout the day. So those categories would roughly be thinking, communicating, working with videos, working with photos, and then if you can count it as work, relaxing, like stuff in between, while a video's crunching through some effects or something, I got some downtime, just like relaxing a little bit. So you can check out what I've got on the dock right now. It gives you kind of a snapshot of what I use most frequently here. At the moment, my go-to notes app is still Bear Notes. So actually, I use this all the time whenever I'm coming up with outlines. I use it as a bit of a wiki for myself, actually. And you can see I like the features like highlighting, etc. That's neither here nor there. Right now, I've got an LLM open over here. And I often have those two open together. Then it's very easy if I need to just bring up a website on the iPad itself. Or I'm also still using My Mind, which you can see, I just drag that up from the other screen and that's real fluid and works great also. So I'm feeling like there's not a lot that I'm missing when it comes to that thinking or researching kind of browsing mode. In fact, versus the rest of tech YouTube, I'm willing to go against the grain a little bit and say I actually like how Stage Manager works, especially with this setup with the studio display and the iPad Pro. I almost prefer writing and thinking here with this setup versus the Mac. I don't know, there's just something about it. It feels really light and swift and it just works really well. Things click for me. Same thing basically when it comes to communication, Apple Mail, messages, no big deal there. Now, one caveat is the browser situation. I've been using Arc for a long time and I've recently switched over to Sigma OS. Either way, Chromium based, lots of plugins, and Safari, especially Safari on the iPad, is just not up to a lot of the tasks that I'm used to getting up to. I can work around that for the most part, so it's kind of like a little letdown rather than a deal killer, but still, it is sort of unfortunate. Now, where things kind of fall apart a little bit for me is when it comes to professional stuff, video stuff, and that's kind of ironic considering Final Cut Pro is awesome. You're looking at the multicam preview. I'm shooting with 3 iPhones right now on a different iPad Pro than the one I've got hooked up over here. This one is just right here so that I can look at it and control all the cameras. So Final Cut for iPad is awesome for the iPad. And really it only makes sense to use it on the iPad screen itself. Here's one of the problems. When I drag this up into this really nice spacious monitor, then it has to remain the size of the iPad screen. That dimensionality, that ratio there, if I try to make this any bigger, then it falls apart. It just doesn't work. And that's weird because it's an Apple native app. I don't get why I can't use it in full screen mode here. So Final Cut Pro for the iPad, even the iPad Pro, is really designed for just the iPad screen itself for the most part. Touch first, Apple Pencil's gotten all these new features. I just did a video on the Clips channel about those as well, so you can go check it out. But despite all of those features, I really miss having plugins over on the Mac. I guess I'm just too much of a power user in some regard to get away with using Final Cut on the iPad for anything other than production. I really rely on it heavily for the production side of things. But when it comes to post-production, then I usually switch over to the Mac typically. One of the reasons that I do that is because I can use Gling AI, and that lets me create a little bit faster. And what it does is it transcribes everything using AI, and then I can just edit the talking headshots and the videos like a word processor. And I listen at 2 times speed and it goes super fast. And then I can export that and use the multicam footage and combine it all together on the Mac. And I can't do that over on the iPad version. It's just unfortunate. I feel like this is sort of a metaphor. There's so much potential for the iPad, but it remains unfulfilled. There's all this extra space around this iPad-sized app here going to waste, not being able to be used. And that's just kind of an analogy for the iPad Pro in general. There's so much potential, but a lot of it's just kind of going to waste and is unused. For the most part, I really don't like Adobe products. It's one of those things that I have to use for a few different reasons. I really don't like Premiere Pro, way prefer Final Cut Pro. But we all have these crazy edge cases that tie us into different things. Autopod is a plugin for Premiere Pro that's only for Premiere Pro. If they came to Final Cut Pro, I would ditch it immediately. That basically lets you AI edit a podcast with multiple people. I have some other podcast material that I'm involved with, and I rely on this instead of having to hire an employee to just go through it. And it's so fun to watch, like slices up all the footage with the different angles and the audio and stuff. And it comes out looking really good in just like a matter of minutes. And I can't not use that. So there's literally some stuff that my business relies on that I can't really do just because of the nature of the software mostly on the iPad. And for all the great apps that exist in the App Store, we're really talking about stuff where there really isn't a workaround, unfortunately. Now, like a lot of you, even if you don't do video stuff, I do a lot of photo editing. And also, since I have the Adobe Suite because I'm roped in for some other stuff, then I use Photoshop still over on the Mac because I'm used to it. Number one, when I went to school, like that was the app that everyone was using. That's what we learned. And so I still have all that muscle memory, even though it's really bloated. Photoshop on the iPad is honestly pretty lame. It works, it's better than nothing, but honestly, Apple just bought Pixelmator and you might as well just use that. There's actually a ton of pretty capable photo editing apps over on the iPad. So I feel like I'm actually not really missing anything in the photo department over on the iPad versus the Mac. I'll just add too, another app that I use quite a bit is called Descript, and it lets me edit podcasts and videos and various other things, make clips and whatever. It's something that I pay a subscription, I don't know what it is, like 30 bucks a month or something. So like if I'm paying that, I want to use it. Obviously I found a use for it in my workflow, and there's not a Descript app over on the iPad. Now that's not Apple's fault, but I can use this through the browser, but it's really not a supported experience. Like it works, but it's kind of janky. So I can make do. I think this is a great illustration. Everyone has an app that's a web app that they need, they rely on for their business or whatever, or school. And you can do it through Safari, maybe if you're lucky, but it's just not quite all the way there. It's not fully baked. And that's sort of the experience I have with Descript. And it just kind of illustrates some of the little hiccups that you run into when you try to really make a professional go out of it using the iPad to anchor your desk setup. Now, honestly, when it comes to quote unquote relaxing, I don't do a whole lot of gaming these days anymore, so I'm not the best person to talk to about this, but the iPad has enough to keep me occupied. There's a few little things like YouTube's kind of weird if you use the official YouTube app over here, but you can make it work. Like this is the Daily Tech Accelerate playlist, which you know about if you subscribe to the newsletter, which you should do because it's free, comes out on Fridays, free wallpapers and whatever. So honestly, this is great for entertainment. The studio display is great. The speakers are great on both the iPad and the studio display. And I mean, the iPad display with this OLED is ridiculous, obviously, for content. Sometimes you can throw a video up down there while you're doing some work on the studio display. So yeah, no complaints there. Which brings me to this. Ultimately, would I be able to switch from my MacBook Pro to the iPad Pro as we head into 2025? The answer is, unfortunately, not really. And like I could, I mean, technically I could, but I couldn't, run my business to the full extent that I want to or need to. I would like take a hit professionally because there's certain things that I just can't do without my Mac right now. And I think going through things this way, categorizing the sort of work that I do and thinking about the apps that I use and just the little nuances of the workflow really made it crystal clear to me that actually the iPad Pro with this particular setup, as robust as the actual tech itself is and how super adaptable this setup is, and that's why I want to like this so much. I want it to work so bad. Man, it's just that software side of things. It's just not quite there yet. And in fact, it's a little further away, I think, than I even realized as I went through this step by step, task by task, and sort of made some mental notes about the state of things, where it was at. And I'm not happy about reporting on this because I really love the iPad. I really love the studio display. I really love the potential here. But unfortunately, 30% of this is pure potential. That means there's more good than bad. 70% of what I need to do, I can do. But if you notice, the things that are lacking are the things in the professional department for me personally. So if you're going to use the iPad Pro just as a standalone thing, you could plug it into that OWC hub, and use the Magic Keyboard, use the Apple Pencil Pro, which I love. I've made many videos about that. But unfortunately, at least for me and the things that I'm doing, where it really seems to shine right now is in the thinking, researching, communicating, relaxing, and even photo editing modes. And ironically, for how with it Apple is with letting you shoot insanely cool, crisp, great video, and using the iPad and the iPhone and even the Mac all together in crazy ways that nobody else lets you use similar devices, it's just like there's a few things that I just can't get away from over on the Mac side of things. But the good news, I think, I also realize is that since I really made a video last about this sort of a setup, Apple has improved a ton of stuff. Like a ton of stuff that I remember people used to really complain about are so much better now. So let me know what your thoughts are. You know, if you have this setup, then tell me about it. If you're thinking about this setup, what are the, potential hangups? What are things you're excited about potentially? Let's kind of get a discussion going, because I think the more that we talk about this, the more Apple notices and they're like, oh, okay, that's what people are clamoring for. If we don't clamor, then we don't get. So be loud down in the comments. And I think that we'll continue to see a good trajectory of things improving. You got to remember, I say this all the time, the Mac has been around for a really long time. That ecosystem, the apps, the plugins, all that stuff that makes it so convenient, that makes it hard to get away from if you especially started there, then that it's had more time to build up and it just has more momentum. And the iPad is a younger ecosystem and it's building up as we speak, but it can feel slow sometimes, even then though there's like good progress being made. But that's it for me today. I'll catch you in the newsletter or the next video. Later.